Let's take a look at Unit 1, Going Old School, Laying the Foundation. So, our essential question for this unit is going to be, how do the four definitions of grammar interpret language differently? But we're not going to get to the four definitions of grammar yet. But we're first going to have to talk about just simply why we study grammar and ultimately how grammar changes. And therefore, that'll lead us to understanding why there are different definitions of grammar. So, Chapter 1, why study grammar in the first place? Well, there are four benefits of studying grammar. I imagine there might be more, but I've reduced it to four. The first one is that studying grammar expands one's intelligence. So, if you think about it, for those people who really know their grammar really, really well, we would say they know their grammar cold. We write it, we speak it perfectly. Oftentimes, we're viewed as being educated because really we are educated. So we seem to flex our grammar muscles effortlessly because we understand the mechanics of English language. And so therefore, we naturally communicate effectively and intelligently. So studying your grammar, it can expand your intelligence. Number two, understanding grammar develops confidence and self-reliance. So people who don't understand or don't know their grammar will stumble over their words. They attempt to shield their ignorance. They speak and write oftentimes with insecurity and with timidity. But those of us who really know grammar well, we're poised, we're cool. We don't need to rely on our grammar check or our spell check to look over our work. Therefore, we have this confidence about us, this self reliance, and it comes across as being very natural. Number three, those who use grammar correctly have more validity and have more credibility. So, regardless of what you major in, you're going to use grammar every day in how you communicate your thoughts and your ideas to others. And nothing's worse than having great ideas but not communicating them well or effectively, or have someone question what you're saying because your grammar is poor. So using grammar correctly makes others sit up and they listen. Your ideas, your contributions seem more valid and compelling. Your voice seems more credible and authoritative. Your correct grammar says, I know what I'm talking about. Lastly, number four, with knowing one's grammar comes respect. So, as budding grammar demigods and demigoddesses, we know that with grammar comes respect, and we're wise enough to know that high school is not real life. So, if people are making fun of you for taking a grammar class or for wanting to improve your grammar, that's okay. This is not real life. In the real world is where it's going to matter. So, let those who wish to snicker snicker, and that is correctly punctuated as well. You'll gain respect. You will by knowing your grammar. Second topic for today is looking at how language changes. So we're saying, so long, wherefore. So English grammar sometimes changes because the English language itself sometimes changes. That's really important. That's why I put it in yellow. So there's a common misconception that grammar's static, that the rules of the past are the same rules we have today. And if that were true, then we would all have completely mastered grammar back in eighth grade. There's nothing new to learn. But forsooth, the words we speaketh at each moment are changing. And thank goodness we don't speak this way anymore. And so, therefore, as our times change, our language evolves. And as our language evolves, so too our grammar. So take a look at this example from Romeo and Juliet. The original Romeo and Juliet from Shakespeare, written in early 1600s. O Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou Romeo? Deny thy father and refuse thy name, or if thou wilt not, be but sworn my love, and I'll no longer be a Capulet. Now the modern version, which we call oftentimes the No Fear Shakespeare. O Romeo, Romeo, why do you have to be Romeo? Forget about your father and change your name, or else if you won't change your name, just swear you love me and I'll stop being a Capulet. We can see the language differences. We don't use the word wherefore anymore. Wilt is not a word we use anymore. These and thous have all changed. Language changes, and I'm just over or under, I guess, 400 years. It's going to change. It's going to continue to change. Look at the example from 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 26, in just how the Bible has different variations. King James Version, around the same time of Shakespeare, I therefore so run, not as uncertainly, so fight I, not as one that beateth the air. The New International Version, therefore I do not run like someone running aimlessly. I do not fight like a boxer beating the air. And lastly, this New Living Translation. So I run with purpose, when in every step. I'm not just shadow boxing. I don't think the Apostle Paul knew what shadow boxing was or had that word. And so you can see how the variations have changed over years. Language continues to change. So, of course, we don't talk like King James anymore. And certainly we can give an amen to that. But the point is, we don't speak the way we speak today is not how we even spoke in the 1980s. So oftentimes we say, well, yeah, we're not speaking how we spoke 1600s, but even a matter of 30, 40 years ago, we spoke differently. And the way we spoke in the 1980s, or the way at least I spoke in the 1980s, is different how they spoke in the 1920s. And weren't those years just the bee's knees? Language changes. So not just to be in terms of centuries, but even in decades, language will change. New words are going to nestle their way into our everyday speech and writing all the time. In fact, our lexicon, which is a fancy word for our vocabulary, is rich with words that started out as pure slang. Yeah, the same words and phrases that all the kids are saying now that make their parents roll their eyes often end up as official words in our dictionaries years later. It's kind of groovy. Imagine groovy is this word which all of a sudden started as slang, and now it's certainly in our dictionary and it's certainly part of our lexicon. So, one activity we're going to take on is how to use, like looking at slang, how slang is used now currently, and also looking at old slang. Let me move forward one more. We're also going to take a look at what we call neologisms. So, whereas slang often uses an already invented word, it's already out there, we're just simply giving it a new meaning. Sometimes we don't have a word for what we're trying to describe. All of a sudden, you're like, how do I, like, what word can I use to describe this thing? Well, we create new words all the time. We have a fancy word for them called neologisms. And that'll be the other activity we'll look at. We're going to look at slang as well as neologisms of how new words are created and why certain words stick around. So, someone who seems to drop everything, as if his hands were slippery, it's a Butterfingers, a neologism created at one point. A vacation at home, someone came up with the idea of staycation. Blogosphere, global warming, double whammy, blurb, smog, workaholic, all words that at one point someone created. We recognize these words now, but at one point they were fresh, they were new. They weren't even slang, they were just new words that eventually got enough momentum that they became words, sort of slang. And then from slang or casual words, we eventually said, you know what, we're going to keep this. And it officially becomes part of our vocabulary. So why do some stick around and some don't? I don't know. Some words just seem to stick around because they have a stickiness to them. There's a fun word. Sometimes they're needed, they're useful. There's a gap in our vocabulary that we need to fill with a new word, and so we create it. Sometimes they just have a nice sound to them. So what do you call them when you take a picture of yourself with your cell phone? Ah, we call it a self snap. How about a selfograph? How about a memeage? Nah, let's call it a selfie. Someone created it, and it's stuck around.